Welcome to the official podcast of the For Britain movement, the fastest growing and most exciting political party in the UK today. Exciting guests and interesting conversation every week as we discuss the issues that matter. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss an episode. Now sit back and relax. Here is your host for today's show.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my latest podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening. And thank you for joining in with our live streams. And I know that the last two live streams have been disrupted, which I'm a little bit, well, more than a little bit annoyed about. And both apparently are down to Virgin. So what I'm going to do is look for an alternative to Virgin because two disrupted live streams are enough. So anyway, I'll talk to you about that next week. I have a guest with me today who I've known for quite some time. I can't remember how long, but you'll definitely be familiar with him. He's one of the most active activists on our side of politics. And if you've been to the summer of rallies we had, the summer of what I call the summer of Tommy rallies we had, you'll definitely know his passionate speeches from the stage. It's Richard Inman. Hi, Richard.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thanks. Very well. It's a lovely sunny morning.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's a good day to be locked in your home.
Well, it lifts the spirits a little bit, doesn't it? You can't help but feel a bit lifted by the sun.
Absolutely. Well, I have a little escape. I found a very secluded little beach about 4 minutes drive from my house. So I've been spending a lot of time when the sun was out, swimming in the sea, swimming in the freezing cold Irish Sea, and spending a bit of time on the beach. So my lockdown hasn't been too bad, to be quite honest.
Do you know, Richard, I live near a beach as well. And do you know what I bought myself yesterday? A wetsuit. Because
You've got to do it.
I want to go to the sea, and I want to bring my dog. There's one of my dogs, and I know she would love the sea, but she's just too afraid to go in. So I think if I go in, she'll follow me. She will, 100%. And Anne-Marie, ditch the wetsuit. You don't need them. It's far better if you're not wearing the wetsuit. Just get straight in. That's what I do. No wetsuits are for wimps. Oh, I'm a little bit of a wimp.
No, you're not. Far from it. But you're one of the bravest people I know, for sure.
I'm afraid of the cold. I'm not afraid of Islam.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you get used to the cold. Unlike Islam, you get used to the cold. I don't think we'll ever get used to Islam, but that's another story.
I hope not. All right, Richard. Let's talk a little bit about coronavirus first, because I know it's on everyone's mind. How are you handling it all? What's your view on it? Will we ever come out of it?
Well, I mean, from a personal point of view, again, obviously, because we can't get tested, I'll never know. But about 6 weeks ago, I came down very quickly with all the symptoms of the coronavirus, and I was floored for about 3 weeks. That doesn't mean I had it. Now, I'm not a hypochondriac, and I don't take time off. So for something to floor me, it's got to be something pretty nasty. So if that was coronavirus, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Well, maybe on some of my worst enemies, but not many of them. It was pretty unpleasant from a personal level. I didn't go to hospital, I didn't get tested, but it was a really, really nasty virus that hit me. So I think I'm not one of these conspiracy theorists that doesn't believe that it exists. I believe it 100% exists. Yeah. But there's a couple of things that worry me about one, about the media coverage, and two, about the way the government behaved about this. I think the first thing is the media are not looking at the source. And to me, the source of the coronavirus or coronavirus is really a symptom of globalism. And obviously it came from China. It's almost certainly leaked from the virology lab in China, and I think one of the other things about these virology labs, people don't realize that they're all dual purpose. You can of course you can test viruses, and you can look for vaccines and this, that, and the other, but you can also weaponize viruses. I'm not saying that's happened in this case, but those labs are 100% dual purpose. Porton Down in the UK as a prime example. That's what in the 50s and 60s they were doing the same sort of stuff there. So I think there's a lot more to come out about this from China. See, Trump's gone on the warpath with China, which is great, but media are saying nothing about China. You would think that Boris Johnson created the virus the way that Piers Morgan's behaving. So from that point of view, I think the media's behaved appallingly about this, and the government in allowing flights to just come into the country willy-nilly right the way throughout this this pandemic has behaved appallingly. They've locked us all up in our homes while importing people into the country. Yeah. Week after week after week, day after day. I think someone said there was, at the peak of the virus in March, I think it was about 100,000 people coming in from China. I mean, it's ridiculous that they allowed the borders to stay open while this was happening, in my opinion.
It's crazy. I mean, I think someone put out a meme which was so good about the illegal immigrants still coming in from France.
Yeah.
And they said, we're not allowed to sit on a beach, but illegal immigrants are still coming in. And it's just, and it drives conspiracy theories, Richard.
It does.
It does. I mean, that's so stupidly, it makes people think something's
what's going on. I mean, I think the other thing is, I mean, and we all know that I'm no fan of Nigel Farage, and I'm sure you're not either in a lot of ways, but old Nigel got down to the beach and made a documentary. The media didn't pick up on the content of his documentary. They castigated him for going to the beach and actually having the audacity to make a documentary about migrants illegally coming into our country and bringing coronavirus in with them. And that shows the hypocrisy of the mainstream media. And for me, I was looking at your book again, and I don't know if people haven't got the book Beyond Terror. They need to read this because it's a prophetic book, in my opinion. It's talking about, not about the problems with Islamic terrorism, but the problems with Islamism and globalism and all the stuff that comes with that. And you touch on a lot of these issues, not on China, obviously, but on a lot of these issues in that book. And the reality is that the media is just not talking about the issues that people need to hear.
And it's not for the first time. I'll give you just off the top of my head, I'll give you a headline from the BBC. And the headline was, China sends 100,000 gowns or whatever it was, PPE to Scotland. China sends, they want us to believe China's sending these things for free. We bought them.
Yeah.
B, this disease came out of there in the first. The media, when it does speak up, is pro-China.
Yes. And there's reasons for that, because I mean, if you look at the history of the way the UK has dealt with China, first of all, we sold Hong Kong out in the late 90s, and the same Chris Patten that caused all sorts of problems. Well, we're not going to that with Northern Ireland, but the same Chris Patten sold China out in the 90s, and instead of playing hardball, I mean, Hong Kong has basically been taken over by China to all intents and purposes. We're seeing with the pro-democracy protest. But China for years has been repressing all sorts of minorities, Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, every single religious minority in China has been getting crushed. The Tibetan Buddhists and so on and so forth. Now, the only one that the media talks about are the Uyghur Muslims. They don't talk about the Christians that have been put in concentration camps and the churches that have been demolished. They quite rightly talk about the Uyghur Muslims. But what about all the other people that are being repressed in China? And the Chinese government is an authoritarian dictatorship. And Britain and the rest of the Western world, for the sake of filthy lucre, for the sake of making money, have done deal after deal after deal with China. Our 4 last prime ministers have all prostituted themselves. Sorry, not the 4 last prime ministers, 3 last prime ministers and George Osborne have all prostituted themselves to China without a shadow of a doubt. David Cameron, even last year, David Cameron was running around the city of London as a salesman for China, trying to pitch the Belt and Road Initiative to investors in the city to get massive investment to pay for China to build rail links, ports, and roads that will basically bring Chinese goods and Chinese people into Western Europe en masse. And nobody's talking about that. Why are people highlighting the fact that this is a result of compromising with China and letting China run roughshod over democracy in their own country and actually threatening our democracy as well? And nobody's mentioning that.
And all of it for cheap products.
All of it for money. It's for cheap products and investment. Money. And that doesn't even mention the investment that the investments that China have made in the UK, owning huge parts of British industry, owning British steel, British nuclear plants, the 5G network that they're heavily investing in. And again, these things there needs to be a day of reckoning. And I don't think, and this is one of the reasons why we're talking about For Britain, I don't think the current government, they'll do window dressing, but nothing will change, because nothing ever changes, because they've got too much invested in this.
No, there isn't. I mean, the establishment is what it is.
Yeah.
The same establishment that have brought us here. So while they may say a few tough sentences here and there, real action is it's far too damaging to their careers, and it's far too damaging to the immediate prospects. It's too hard, in other words, it's too much hard work, and they'll kick the can down the road for the future generations to deal with. But I feel a great sense of responsibility to future generations to not leave them a world dominated by China. The Chinese Communist Party is not nice people.
No.
They're tyrants, absolute tyrants. And we have given them supreme control in order to get cheap labor, cheap products, cheap tat, as I said to you earlier. And now is our chance, though. But we cannot rely on. I mean, our manifesto is going to change now to reflect what has happened, and to reflect our foreign policy will change, economic policy will change, to reflect what has happened and people's increased knowledge about this issue. Because China is now another big battle we have to fight if we're going to save this country for future generations. That's my view on it.
Absolutely. And I think, like we were saying earlier, I personally would be happier to be poorer and free than have a house full of cheap Chinese phones and cheap Chinese computers. They'll probably break after 4 or 5 minutes anyway. I mean, I think this is a wake-up call, and I think that one good thing that can come out of this is a lot of people have had a lot of time to think, and a lot of time to maybe reassess what's been going on, and if we're going in the right direction as a country. And the problem is that, again, the mainstream media, I mean, I find Piers Morgan absolutely unbearable. I've started a campaign, Send Piers Packing, and we'll have to get a petition up soon for Send Piers Packing. But if Piers goes, there'll be someone else to fill his. But the way they've behaved about this, and the way they haven't looked at the big issues, they haven't looked at how globalism has led to this. And I think that's what we need to do as a movement. We need to say the Islamization of the United Kingdom, Islamic terrorism, the rape of the daughters of England, the China virus, the coronavirus, they're all as a result of globalism. And there's a very small number of people making vast amounts of money. And gradually, the rest of what was once called the middle class are being degraded and becoming poorer and poorer and poorer. And it's more difficult for us to get ahead. And meanwhile, out of this, the economic collapse that's going to come out of this is going to be absolutely dreadful. And out of that collapse, the rich are going to get far, far richer. And I'm no socialist workers' party advocate or anything like that. I'm not coming this from a socialist point of view. But the reality is that the globalists and the very, very rich are going to get richer out of this, and poor Brits of all races and all backgrounds are going to get poorer and poorer as well. And that's the story that needs to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the midst of all that, there is opportunity, and we have to grab it. We have to grab the opportunity to make political change.
Absolutely.
As much as we might like Boris Johnson, and we may be starved for some of the things he says, he is still that establishment that caused this. And it's under his watch that people are still landing from China while we're not allowed to go outside our front door.
Absolutely. And that's a scandal, isn't it? That we're imprisoned and they're shipping migrant labour in. And again, I mean, the migrant labour, when you look at the way migrant labour has been literally abused, and you see it's not just British people that suffer from the importation of migrant labour. A lot of those migrant labourers are treated absolutely dreadfully. A lot of the groups that are bringing in those migrant labourers, they're in a very, very grey area when it comes to legality. There's a lot of people trafficking going on, and that's still happening. So mass migration, whether it's legal or illegal, is not good. Is not necessarily good for the migrants either. And of course, you have the outflow of capital. Somebody comes into the country and they're working in the country to earn money, but they don't live in the country. They're just going to send the money home. So the money's not spent in the country. So again, the country becomes poorer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a recipe for exploitation. And you're right, we're not even, we're told it's a boost to our economy, but actually it's not, because our own people are being deprived of jobs.
Exactly. But I think the point that you're making about the establishment is a must. I mean, since I started this, I've become more and more appalled. One of the things about, veterans are normally very loyal to the government, and we kind of loyal to authority. The way I've seen, demonstrations been policed, the way I've seen Tommy being treated by the legal establishment, by the media establishment, by the political establishment, and obviously now by the social media establishment, and the way I've seen other people in our movement, literally dragged off the streets and locked up for very, very minor offences. Because Tommy's not the only one that's been sent to prison. We could give a catalogue of other people that have been sent to prison for very, very minor things. We are turning into a police state. The establishment does want to stop us, and I think now what we've got For Britain, and I think I made a video the other day. I said, really, For Britain is the only political party that, in all good conscience, I could vote for in the UK. And the reason being, there's nobody else doing what you're doing and standing on the policies that you're standing on. And I think people have got to really go, where do we go politically? Because in whatever it's 4 years' time, going to be another general election. And the Conservatives are bad, but if we get Keir Starmer and the Euro fanatics, they'll be wanting to take us back into the EU. And if this coronavirus thing goes bad for the Conservatives, we could end up with another Labour government, which would be even worse than what we got under the Conservatives. So that's my big worry. And we need a political home, and that's where I think For Britain fill that void. Now that puts a lot of pressure on you, Anne-Marie, because you've got a lot to do in the next 4 years.
Well, look, I completely agree, and thank you for saying that. And I did see a video, and I did say thank you to you on my live stream last night.
Yeah.
But the whole thing went, I won't say what.
Yeah.
The whole thing went wrong. Let me put it diplomatically.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. And I agree. Look, we've had all this doubt. We've had all these people we're 3 years old in October.
Yeah.
We've had people saying you won't last 5 minutes. You've got to. It's not going to work. It will work. And I've always believed in it, which is why I've always stood to my path. And always stuck to the path that I wanted this party to go on. And we're getting better. When we started out, the economic policy was something that was written for us by Godfrey Bloom. Now we're really expanding it and growing, and new things are coming in all the time, and new things are coming up, and we're getting better, and we're learning, and I'm getting better, and I'm learning, and that's the next 4 years I'm so excited about. I intend to get myself elected as a councillor here in Hartlepool first, and I'm saying this at risk of saying I'll have to eat humble pie, but I won't, because I know we can achieve this. And we are going to really go for Labour. And Keir Starmer's a gift to me. I mean, all 5 of them were a gift to me, frankly, because I'm stunned by them. Stunned at how terrible they were. But I completely agree. And it's probably obvious that I would agree that For Britain is the answer, but I do. And that's not arrogance. It's
absolute. I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, really, a lot of people kind of lent their, traditional Labour voters lent their vote to the Conservative Party, and obviously Conservatives are going to try and, but they don't know the working class people. That's the problem with the Conservative Party. Whereas our movement is working class. We don't know the working class people. We are the working class people. You look at Tommy. You look at all the people in our movement that are high profile. None of them are from that elite class that the rest of the political establishment are from. And obviously, as you know, I'm involved with the Hearts of Oak movement, which isn't a political party. It's a pressure group, and it's an anti-establishment pressure group. And I think if we can get the street demonstrations going and really breathe life into the street demonstrations, and you can do the political side of things, I think we can really achieve something. I think we can achieve something even more spectacular than Brexit. And I said that with UKIP, but obviously you did warn me about UKIP, Anne-Marie, and I must eat a little bit of humble pie now and say
I completely understand why you
were right. But the thing is, Anne-Marie, if it had worked with UKIP, it would have been amazing, because we'd had a ready-made nationwide party that we could have just taken over. But obviously the establishment in UKIP knew what we were up to, and they didn't want us to do it. It's as simple as you found out as well, so yeah.
Plus, I think this requires something fresh. I mean,
Yeah.
the upside of UKIP was that it had that machinery in place and that it was already a household name.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, the downside was also that it was already a household name.
Exactly.
And that it had all the baggage of it, and it was so closely associated with Brexit. But in any case, that's we are where we are, and we have to look to the future. So tell me, Richard, about your journey into all this. How did you end up here? What's your story?
Well, it really goes back to the 1980s. So, I mean, if we've got 2 hours, I mean, no, it goes back to the 1980s. I went to school in Middlesbrough, which is a working class city in the northeast of England, industrial city, shipbuilding, petrochemical. And I mean, I guess a couple of things. First of all, in the 80s, Middlesbrough was completely shredded by, again, the sort of Thatcher and really a lot of her economic policies, which led to globalism. I mean, all the heavy industry died, quite a depressed town. And it was a rough town. It was a hard town. Very, very good people, very tough people. And I went to school in an inner city school in Middlesbrough. And when you first go to school, everything's kind of, all the kids try and get. Well, there's a lot of Pakistani Muslims in the school that I went to, and everyone gets on all right when you're kids. But what we noticed when we got to sort of third, fourth year, all the other kids got on. The Indian kids, the Sikh kids, the black lads, the West Indians as they were then. We all got on really well. There was no sort of genuinely there wasn't racism in the school. But what we noticed was that the Pakistani Muslim kids seemed to not really want to mix with us. And I always thought this was a bit odd. I couldn't really work out why it was. And I would chat to them, time to time, and they'd be saying things. Oh yeah, my cousin's he's off out to Afghanistan to fight against the Russians. And I'm thinking, what's your cousin doing in Afghanistan in the 80s fighting against the Russians? So I suddenly became aware there was actually something different about Islam.
Yeah.
And we ended up in a situation in the school I went to where we had a real confrontation where there was really a showdown between all the rest of the kids, the Indian kids, the Sikh kids, the black kids, the white kids, and the Muslims, because they were literally bullying people. They were, they were intimidating people, and straight away something just lit up in me, and I thought there's actually something not right about this. So anyway, that was that. We ended up on the BBC in 1984, BBC Northeast, because we had a bit of a riot in the school and the police were patrolling the school and all that sort of stuff. So I realised there was something about Islam that wasn't the same as anything else that was out there. After that, I kind of left school, joined the army after what the for a couple of years, settled in Northern Ireland after I left the army, married a girl from Northern Ireland. But obviously what I'd seen in Northern Ireland reflected exactly on what I was seeing in Middlesbrough, with the sectarian division, and literally the community's been split in two. And so from the late 80s when I was in Northern Ireland, I could look back to Middlesbrough and say, that's going to happen in the UK. Now, of course, I was talking to people about this in Northern Ireland in the 90s and in the early 2000s, before 9/11 or just before 9/11, and people thought I was completely mad. And then 9/11 happened, and people started saying, hold on, what were you saying about Islam? I'd read the Quran. I'm not a scholar. I'm not sort of, I'm not going to pretend something I'm not. But I had a good idea. I had a good handle on what Islam was all about. And then I became a Christian. And when I became a Christian, I realized the power of religion. And this is what people don't realize. Muslims do things in a certain way because their religious culture for the past 1400 years has inspired them to do that. So I came to the conclusion that Muslims were not any different to any of the rest of us. They were prisoners of Islam in the same way that you could be a prisoner of any ideology. If the Chinese people in China they're not all communists, but they're prisoners of the communist system. And what I realized was that Muslims were actually, in a sense, in bondage to Islam itself. And what would be a great thing is to see I love it when I hear about people becoming ex-Muslims. That's why, and there's so many of them now. The problem is that they're terrified to admit that they're ex-Muslims. So the problem with Islam is the ideology. So I was aware of that. Anyway, cut a long story short. 2017, after spending years watching Tommy and you guys doing what you were doing and thinking, is it the right time to start talking about this? Is it the right time? Because I knew there was a cost for this, because there was a cost even in the 80s when I was, taking stuff in the 80s. I knew there was a cost taking a stand against Islam. And 2017, the terrorist attacks happened in London, in Manchester, seeing little girls blown to bits in a pop concert, seeing those pictures of those people. And everybody's forgotten about that now. Everybody's forgotten about the children that were blown to bits in a pop concert in Manchester. Nobody talks about that anymore. But when I saw that, I just thought I have to get involved. And there was a guy in Burnley set up a group called Veterans Against Terrorism. I got involved with him. I said, look, I've been looking at this for years. I can help you out with mission statements, websites, and that sort of thing. I ended up, I suppose, the de facto spokesman of Veterans Against Terrorism. And that's how I got involved in the movement. And it just kind of grew from there. Again, the connections were made. I met some fantastic people. And I think we've changed the way that the discourse is had. But the problem is, because we've done that, the mainstream media, the authorities, the police, the social media giants have clamped down, as silenced us, because they don't want us talking about this. They don't want us talking about the problems with Islam. And we, sometimes we say radical Islam, but the reality is the problem is Islam, and the problem comes from the Quran, it comes from Hadith, it comes from the alleged life of Muhammad. And that's why people are doing what they're doing, because they're influenced by that religion. And that's the story that we've got to tell. And it's difficult to do it because, as you and I both know, it's dangerous to do that for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, certainly is. And you spoke a little bit last week, I think, Richard, about Nazism in our movement. And I get really, really exhausted and tired of people telling me, don't punch right, or whatever, that sort of thing. Don't attack people on your side. They're not on my side. They're not. They're enemies of the country in the same way that Adolf Hitler was an enemy of the country. Absolutely. Some of these people. I'm sure you and I both know that we both do our research. We know who these people are. Yeah. We know what they believe. We know that they idolize Adolf Hitler. We know that they think it was that Germany in the 1930s was a wonderful place to be. And we know that they've been accused of conspiring to murder. One of the leaders, I'm not going to name people, I don't want to them one of the leaders of this new let's call them what they are, new Nazi movement. One of the leaders of this new Nazi movement was questioned for conspiring to murder Nick Griffin. That's the sort of people that we're talking about here. He was recorded on a television program saying how much he wanted to be the equivalent of Billy Wright in the Northern England town that he lived in. Now, Billy Wright, as probably our listeners don't know, was involved in loyalist paramilitaries and killed a lot of people. So is this guy saying he wants to be, some sort of hitman running around the country killing people? Is that what he's saying? These are the sort of people that are running these groups, and they've rebranded themselves, and they've probably done a few media studies course, and they come across very, very plausibly, and they're hoodwinking people. And Anne-Marie, we've got to take a stand against them. And you said things, I've said things, Tommy said things, but there's a deafening silence from other people in our movement, and people need to grow a pair. In the same way it takes courage to speak out against Islam, it takes courage to speak out against the Nazis, because they are dangerous. And given the chance, they would do us harm. And that's why a lot of people, I think, stay silent. And maybe they're worried about losing a few followers. Well, listen, I don't care. I don't have any followers, so I'm not bothered if I lose anybody. I just want to speak the truth. And I've always been to me, the Islamists, the Nazis, and the far left are all different sides of the same coin. They all believe the same things. They're all totalitarians. They're all so heavily into identity politics, as it not true.
And in the same way, if we had Black Lives Matter saying that black people are more important than white people, I would go after them as well. Because, and I think, Anne-Marie, the other thing is, the reason this is happening is because there is a problem with mass immigration. There is a problem with positive discrimination, which is a dreadful word, where basically, especially in things like the BBC, if you turn on the BBC, it's almost like there's no white people live in England anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, that and those things are true. Those things are really happening. But what these Nazis are doing is they're capitalizing on that and trying to bring in this ethno-state. And I think we can't go too far wrong. If you think about Martin Luther King Jr. and, you know, what he said about judging people on the contents of the character, not on the color of the skin. Now that's the sort of equality that I believe in. That's the old-fashioned equality. But what's happened is the far left, with their identity politics, have created a monster on the far right, which will feed, and they both feed off each other. And of course, the left were always screaming Nazi at me, you know, and screaming Nazi at you, and they didn't know that we were doing more to fight Nazis than they've ever done. You know, I mean, this is the lunacy of the whole thing. So I was so encouraged when I saw that video, and it's one of the reasons I thought, well, do you know something? I've hesitated long enough about, you know, what political party to support. Well, I'm going to stand with anyone that stands against Nazis, and that's the reality of the situation. And I thought what you did was fantastic, making those 2 live streams. And of course, you got attacked. I've been attacked, and you know, they're not aware, but you know, there's people in those groups that feed me little tidbits of information, and they're still coming after me, and they're still coming after you, and they're still going to come after Tommy. But I say let them come.
You know what? It's our party has so much support since that video, and I have to say, after I'd done it, I thought, but it has to be done. And I wanted that line drawn in the sand. I got so tired of people comparing us or thinking that we are like this, that I just had to draw a line in the sand. And it was a risk, and I think, you know, because I'm sure we lost a few people, but that line is now drawn and it'll never be confused again. And for me, that was absolutely much needed. And I'm so, so glad I did it.
So am I, Anne-Marie. So am I. Because, I mean, the interesting thing is, when you think about this, one of the acid tests for me is if you're attacking people because of their ethnic background, the color of the skin, that's totally beyond the pale for me. If you're attacking someone because they're Jewish, that's totally beyond the pale for me. I mean, and that's what these people are about. They are unreconstructed Nazis that have just put a little different flavor on what they do. And the sad thing is, many of our people have been hoodwinked by them, and I would like to see them come back and apologize. Well, not necessarily apologize, they don't need to apologize, but just change their minds, you know, and realize that they've been lied to and that they've been deceived by one or two. I mean, there's probably about 3 or 4 leaders in these groups, and most of them have played their hands. Now, I think there's probably still one that hasn't played his hand yet. I'm not going to say who that is, but most of them have played their hands and made themselves known for what they are and what they believe. And we've got to stand against them. But, you know, what I don't want to do either is give them too much oxygen either, Anne-Marie, because you know, they thrive off it. They love attacking us, and they love demonizing us. And if you're getting attacked by the left, and you're getting attacked by the Nazis, and you get attacked by the Islamists and the globalists, you're probably doing something right.
You absolutely have to be. It's exactly spot on where you need to be, because we are the moderate voice. We really are. And that's why we're so hated by the mainstream. Partly because we are, as you said earlier, working class people. The elites don't like it when the working class get uppity and start making demands. So that's one reason. But also because we're so glaringly telling the truth that they just cannot have it.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that you bring to this, Anne-Marie, is an intellectual rigor that isn't elitist. I mean, you know, again, I was talking about the book Beyond Terror. You know, that is an extremely well-written, well-researched book, and that threatens the establishment, because they don't want people in our movement to be clever. They don't want people in our movement to be intelligent. Tommy's the same. Tommy, when Tommy does a TV interview, they don't interview Tommy anymore. because he destroys them, you know. And that's why they're so afraid of us, and that's why they want to destroy us. And I'll be honest with you, I genuinely think it's not beyond the realms of possibility that a lot of these far-right whack jobs are working for the state, because it's the best way of splitting, destroying, and discrediting our movement is get these far-right Nazi lunatics to sow discord, to split our movement, to cause problems, to do Nazi salutes and all the rest of the stuff at demos. They want to do that to give, to give the media what they want, so that they can say, look, they're all Nazis. Well, I won't play that game. I mean, at the end of the day, I've had terrorists try and kill me before, so I'm not worried about a few jackbooted Nazis, saying nasty things on my social media accounts. It doesn't really worry me.
No, I mean, it's you've put that brilliantly, Richard. And also, I think something else you put really well is that they are the hard left, the hard right, and the Islamists are all the same. They are all authoritarian. So we have to remember what we are fighting against. We're fighting against tyranny. We're fighting against the repression that we're feeling from all these different areas, including from our own state. We're fighting for the old British tradition of liberty and individual freedom. And anything that threatens that, I will oppose it.
Absolutely, I understand. I mean, looking at it's really interesting, because looking at the chapter in your book where you talk about the solution, and you're talking about accountable government, reforming of education, apply the law equally to all, control immigration, and so on. It goes on. I mean, it's something when I set up a little group called UK Freedom Movement. I'm still pushing it from time to time. The main things that we focus on are almost exactly the same. It's freedom, equality, democracy, and sovereignty. And that's, they are true British values, and they're historical British values. And that's really, really important. I think the other thing is, I think one of the things that, again, I've never pushed it in the movement, because I don't want to put people off unnecessarily. But I think getting back to, I guess, the Christian heritage of the British Isles, which I think has had a huge influence on who we are as a people. And again, the sort of very, very, the basic principles, sort of Sermon on the Mount, 10 Commandments. Again, most of our nation are now completely ignorant of those, and that's really, you can't blame anyone but the church for not doing their job properly and not teaching people properly. But I think the sort of Christian heritage of the UK is something that I think we have to talk about, and we have to, again, look at it warts and all. It's not a completely unblemished history or past, but at the same time, it is something that has made us who we are, and again, you would think that, that the British state started in 1945 with the National Health Service, if you listen to what's going on at the minute,
Oh God, the NHS, we'll never be allowed to criticise the NHS again.
No. That's going to get you about 10 years in prison. Anne-Marie, I know you push for time, but I want to talk about very quickly about what's happening in Scotland, because I didn't even know that was happening until your video the other day. This is the de facto blasphemy law, similar to one that they tried to bring in the UK in 2006. Just tell us a bit about that, Anne-Marie. What's happening with that blasphemy law, or what will become a blasphemy law, and who's behind it?
Well, the Scottish National Party are behind it. And what they've cleverly done is abolish the old blasphemy law, which is a blasphemy law to protect Christianity. And it hasn't been used in 178 years. So it's not a big threat to the freedom of the Scottish people. They're going to abolish that within the same piece of legislation so that they can sell it as the abolishment of blasphemy. And in this legislation, they're bringing in that if you stir up hatred against a group of people, you can face a 7-year prison sentence. Now, that video that I made has been taken down by YouTube. And the wording they used to tell me why is that I was stirring up hatred of a group of people. Now, what I did in that video was talk about the hatred against non-Muslims and against women that are particularly prevalent throughout the Quran. So connecting those dots, Scotland is going to introduce a law, and I guarantee it, that that law will act in the same way that YouTube has acted.
Yeah.
That if you are negative about the Quran, if you speak truthfully about the teachings of the Quran, you will be stirring up hatred against Muslims, and it will be a criminal offence. We will not be able to point out, for example, the scriptural drivers behind FGM or child marriage or the terror attacks, or any of the horrible things, the many array of horrible things that are related to this religion. We won't be allowed to say that they are that the religion is the driver behind it, because that will be stirring up hatred against Muslims, and that will be a criminal offence. And I guarantee you that's how that Scottish law is going to work, just as YouTube worked in taking down that video.
And again, I see the sticky fingerprints of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Muslim Council of Britain all over this, because it's very, very similar to what they tried to do in the UK under Blair's government in 2006. And there's an interesting story about how that got. I'll not go into it today, but basically that legislation that Blair was pressured by the Muslim Council of Britain to get on the statute books to again ban the criticism of Islam on exactly the same grounds, because that's what this is all about. I believe the Justice Secretary in Scotland is a Muslim gentleman with some. Well, I'm not going into it because these people are very litigious, so I'm not going to say too much.
He does have dubious links. I've given a speech about it.
There are dubious links. There are very dubious. In fact, all you got to do is Google his name, and you can find the dubious links with all sorts of strange organisations and charities.
Yeah.
But I see the Muslim Council of Britain's sticky fingers on this, and the Muslim Brotherhood sticky fingers on this, and this is what they're trying to do. They don't need to launch terrorist attacks, because they can do it through political means, and that's what people have got to wake up to. That it's far more dangerous in a way. The terror attacks wake people up, and as dreadful as they are, they wake people up to the fact that Islam is a dangerous cult that is created havoc for 1400 years. But the way that these political entities work, and the lobby groups, and the power that they have in the UK is absolutely frightening. But there's still hope, because in 2006 they tried to get this through Parliament. Blair had a majority of 150 MPs. They had, funnily enough, a by-election in Scotland, where Blair sent all his whips to basically do the campaign trail to try and win this by-election against the SNP, and people didn't turn up for the vote. I lobbied my local MP, along with me and 6 little old Christian ladies in Bangor in Northern Ireland, lobbied our local MP. She changed her vote, and the vote was defeated by 1 vote, and the law didn't get on the statute book. So the amendments got on the statute book.
Richard, are you responsible for that 1 vote?
I think I am.
You know what? Do you know?
I know that sounds a bit arrogant, but I've been.
When I say that, this is what I mean by a couple of people can change the world. I'm
Absolutely.
Seriously, I knew that had dropped by 1 vote, but I didn't know it was your MP.
It was our MP. We wrote to her, and we wrote to her with a little prayer meeting. We were praying about it. We wrote to her, and we prayed, and she said, "I'm not interested in this. This isn't my thing. Islam's nothing to do with Northern Ireland. I'm going to abstain." We wrote to her again. She said, "Oh my goodness, I've just seen this. This is dreadful." And she changed her vote, and she voted against the amendment. So she voted for the amendment, the sort of de facto blasphemy law, and that was stopped in 2006. Blair, interestingly enough, Blair walked out of the lobby and didn't vote at all. So it's a very strange set of circumstances, and again, I don't want to go down a really spiritual route, but for me, prayer was answered there, because that would have put us in a very, very difficult position. And we wouldn't have been able to do the things that we've done in the past 2.5 years if that law had been on statute, but we'd all been in prison.
Absolutely. And that was one of the big threats of Corbyn winning.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Anne-Marie, the threat is still there. These battles are going to come back time and time and time again, and we're going to have to fight the same battles over and over again. And that's why we need to start taking votes off these parties on these issues, because if we can do that, they will be so terrified that they will stop even thinking about bringing these pieces of legislation before Parliament. I mean, the Scottish thing. I was talking to some of the guys in in one of the other groups, I was saying, look, we need to do something about Scotland. And they're saying, oh, well, Scotland can deal with Scotland. I says, no. I says, I believe in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It says we need to help our Scottish friends to oppose this. So I think we need to have a strategy for this, Anne-Marie. Maybe when the lockdown's lifted, we can maybe even organise a demo outside the Scottish Parliament, and really, let's test their legislation.
That's not a bad idea, Richard. Should we? I mean, let me have a look. Let me have a look at what the timetable is for this legislation. And maybe we can organise something, because that's actually a really good idea. And you're right, we need to start fighting as a United Kingdom.
Absolutely.
And Scotland is ours just as much as, so I think it's a brilliant idea to go up to Scotland, show some United Kingdom solidarity and oppose this thing. So
I think so. And if we plan it right, we could, and obviously it have to be after lockdown, because, you can't really do anything, with what's going on at the minute. But if we start planning, we could have something really big, and it could, we did a demo in Scotland at the beginning with of the Veterans Against Terrorism thing, and it wasn't hugely well attended, but it was good. But if we had a lot of time to plan, we could probably do something quite good.
Okay, well, let's me and you stay in touch about that then, Richard. Yeah. We'll sort that out.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it needs to be before the legislation goes through. But then again, once the legislation is on the statute book, you can still protest against it.
You can.
I think.
But I'll have a quick look and see what I can find. Well, let's stay in touch about that. Yeah. I'll definitely get something sorted, because I'd love to get a little bit of oomph going on from our direction of politics in Scotland, because there's a lot of people who think like us in Scotland. It's just they're drowned out by the SNP types. Absolutely.
And one of the things, one of the worrying things about Scotland is that there isn't a voice like yours in Scotland, and there should be. I mean, the reality is that Scottish Unionists, working class Scottish Unionists, again, do not have anyone to vote for. Because you've got the Labour Party, who are just as useless in Scotland as they are in the rest of the UK. They claim to be unionists, but I would question that. And the Scottish Unionist vote is a massive underrepresented constituency. Because me, I've never wanted Scotland to leave the UK. I think we've got a lot going for us when we stay together as one United Kingdom. And I think if you organised up there, you could probably get traction. But I mean, that's the long-term thing. Obviously, I mean, we've got to go in baby steps, I suppose, first. But
we do.
What do you think about the grooming report then, Anne-Marie? What's your thoughts on this, and why has it been quashed, and can we get it published?
Can we get it published? I mean, we've had public pressure from public figures and people who are prominent in these issues, like Sarah Champion. We've had the spectacle of the Home Secretary trying to argue that she wants something published, and then facing bullying accusations immediately afterwards. Bullying accusations she's now been cleared of, but the damage is done. It's the accusation that does the damage. And it's really, if I remember Jared Batten saying on Twitter that Priti Patel may be the real thing. And to me, she had shown, I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying it's a possibility. She had shown that she was on the side of the people for 5 minutes, and they shut her up fairly sharp. And she won't make that mistake again of being on the side of the people. So regardless of, I don't know what I'd say. She's not. I'd say she can easily be quite frank and upfront and all the rest of it. And a lot of people are wusses and don't like that. So I can imagine she may be the type to, I think she was accused of walking into a room and saying, why the F is everyone so useless? To me, she's the type of person who'd say that, but I'm the type of person who'd say that as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, me too. I mean, that's it, But, I like Priti Patel, I must say. I
do as well, I have to say. But, she's been silenced now.
Yeah.
And now we'll never know. But I think what I would think would be in the report probably isn't. So it's easy for me to dismiss it and say, well, the report finds that actually the teachings of Islam are hugely relevant here. I don't think the report will even look into that.
No.
I think what they're hiding is actually their own incompetence.
Yeah.
more so than what we actually wanted to be in the report, which was the truth about the characteristics of these grooming gangs and how they learn to be who they are. I don't think that will even have been in it. And I'd like to think that that's why we're not hearing it, because it exposes, but actually it's probably not. It's probably just the incompetence and the casual, callous approach of both Labour and Tory to this issue. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make things too difficult, so they leave it. That's what it will reveal. And
I mean, it's, you know, the reality is, I mean, people are talking about the, you know, obviously what's happening with this virus and the incompetence of the government. I mean, this has got to be, you know, I mean, Lord Pearson suggested that there could be 1 million victims of these gangs in the last 30 years. And I say, even in the 80s, when I was at school, that, you know, there was white girls getting into cars with Asian men of Pakistani origin. In 84, you know, so this isn't something that's just happened. This has been going on for a very, very long time. So, and again, the other thing that's never talked about, which we don't talk about it, and we probably should, is the connection between the Pakistani Muslim community and the heroin trade, particularly the heroin trade in the United Kingdom. And again, it's ripped white working class communities apart up and down the north, you know, in towns in the north of England, caused huge problems. And in the 80s, we knew who was bringing the heroin into Middlesbrough. And again, obviously, I'm not going to name them, but they were Pakistani Muslim businessmen who were bringing it in from Afghanistan, Hindu Kush. And that was known, that was common knowledge in the 80s. So I don't think it'll have changed any in the last 40 years or whatever it was. So, you know, that's another thing that's never been discussed, and our movement's never discussed. And I think that's something we should be looking at as well. What is the connection between these grooming gangs and the heroin trade and you know, more, you know, that sort of criminality, that high level criminality?
Do you know, I've been thinking of something to write my Sunday column on this week. And I might just have a look into that. Sounds like it's probably something very murky, though. I'm not sure I'll find it.
It's extremely murky. It's extremely murky. I mean, it's another rock that you probably don't want to look under. But the reality is, it is there, and you know, it's like anything. It's finding the evidence, because of course the authorities don't really want the evidence to come out because of the implications for community cohesion.
Yeah.
You know.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You're right. We ought to be talking about that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Richard. Well, thank you so much. We've gone way over, but that's okay. I'm sure people will be delighted to listen. We'll need to get you on another time. Any plans? What are any immediate plans? Anything you want to tell people about?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go swimming again. That's about all I can do at the minute, Anne-Marie.
Sounds good to me.
You know, we're not allowed out to play. So I mean, and my problem is I'm stuck in Northern Ireland. So even when the lockdown is lifted, I'm not sure how easy it is for me to get flights and ferries and this, that, and the other. So I mean,
that's
there's a lot going on in terms of me getting across to Great Britain, and obviously the reality is most of our activism is done in GB. I mean, politically, Northern Ireland's strange sort of strange place. It's still totally sort of carved up on, you know, orange and green lines. So to talk about the issues that we're talking about, people will listen, but to get political traction with that is still difficult, because obviously we've still got huge problems with the problems that we've had for a long time in Northern Ireland. And one of the things, when I first came to the movement, one of the things I was saying to people, listen, don't go down the road that we went down. Don't go down the road of turning to violence and retribution. It's not going to work. It creates all sorts of problems. And that's why I've always been, I have no real skin in the game when it comes to politics in GB, because I can't stand because of where I live. I can't really influence things that much. But what I've always done is kind of cheerleaded a political voice for our movement, because I know if you don't have a political voice, you gravitate to the extremes and things can get very, very nasty. And that's why I think what you're doing is absolutely vital for our movement, and not just for our movement, for the country, to give people something some hope that there is an alternative to what's happening. Because if people don't have any hope, where does that end? It ends in all sorts of horrible things that we don't want to even look at. So that's why I think the political side of it has to be pushed. I've always tried to encourage Tommy to, down the political road as well, So as I said, Anne-Marie, I would love to see, I did say Gerard Batt and Tommy Robinson and Anne-Marie Waters, but I would now think Gerard's pretty much retired, but let us see Tommy Robinson and Anne-Marie Waters walking into Parliament and just see the look on the establishment faces as you guys walk in to take your seats.
Well, I don't know what Tommy's plans are, Richard, but I'm walking into Parliament.
Absolutely. I mean, that would be a great day. I'll be cheering from the gallery for sure. That'd be a great day, Anne-Marie.
Richard, thank you ever so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything you give to this movement. Thank you for the very flattering videos and the very flattering compliments to me. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I mean, when I say, at the end of the day, when I say things, I mean them. The reality is, I've got to know you over the past, 2.5 years, and you've maintained a completely steadfast stand on these issues. You've never wavered. You've never backed down, and to me, that counts, hugely. You've always stood by Tommy when he's been going through his trials and tribulations. And again, there's a cost comes with that, for all of us. That's why I suddenly said, well, look, to me, we've got to decide on what we're going to do, and there's no time to waste. That's the other thing. There's a real sense of urgency with this. We need to move fast. Yeah. And the one thing I would say is we need to all work together. We need to get as many people working together as we possibly can. So that's, we need to have that sort of that unity of people that genuinely believe what we believe, not the crazies on the Nazi side of things, but the people who are genuinely in our little zone need to work together. I think that's vitally important, and that's something that's always difficult to achieve. But I think the benefits of that would kind of magnify what we're all trying to do.
No, I agree, but I think everyone is doing their little bit.
Yes,
everyone is doing their bit, and everyone's role in this is absolutely vital. Street protests are as vital as a political party.
Yeah.
Because it's the street protests who let people know that there's someone out there who feels as they do. It lets the public know. People going by on buses past the street protest are having their eyes open to something.
Absolutely.
They're really, really important. So we've all got our roles to play, but I completely agree. We do need politics because it's where the power is. Whether we like it or not, the decision makers in our society are the elected, sitting in the councils or sitting in Parliament. They're the ones who make the decision. So that's where we have to go. We have to go after them. But everything, every protest, every YouTube video, every tweet that is on our side is vital, because everything reaches somebody and you have a snowball effect, and then you have a movement moving in a direction to save the country, and that's what we need. Ultimately, that's what we need to do, is save our liberties, our British liberties. And we're all.
And I believe we can do it, Anne-Marie. I 100% believe we can do it, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a struggle. It's costly on all sorts of different levels: personal, financial, reputational. It's costly, but the cost is so worth paying, Anne-Marie. And like I say, I know you've taken huge hits down through the years, and we all have. But the price is definitely worth paying to save your country and save the future. Save it for the future. The children. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I always think, what else is there? We're on this planet once.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with it? What are we going to sit back and observe? Or are we going to get stuck in and make a mark on the world? And there's no greater mark we can make, I think, than to leave something for the next generation. It's all about that to me, because people fought for us, but they went through hell so that we could have things. I think we have that duty to the generations coming, and that's really a large part of what drives me. Thanks ever so much, Richard.
Yes, likewise, Anne-Marie. It's always a pleasure, and let's say we always. Well, it's difficult to shut us up. That's the problem, Anne-Marie, isn't it?
That's it. But I'm sure the listeners won't mind at all.
Brilliant. Well, listen, it's a pleasure chatting, and like I say, I mean, we could. I don't know whether you're up for. We could look at maybe doing a YouTube live feed at some point.
Yes.
In the near future, probably while lockdown's still going on, because we're going to have probably a more captive audience. So I don't know if we could get that organised. We can talk about that off air, but we can get that organised.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm going to be bringing guests on my live stream whenever Ed figures out how to do it. Well, I'm sure he does know how to do it, but I don't ask about the technical stuff. I really don't. And
leave that to the techie people. That's
absolutely. They can tell me, and I'm staring blankly, thinking, huh? At the end of it, I'm none the wiser. So it's just best I don't ask. But we are going to be doing that. So I think it'd be great if we could have you. And I do yours as well. It's
absolutely. We can get that. We can get that organised for sure. And again, we could sort of advertise it and get some get a good some good interaction with people that are basically watching the stream. So yeah, we could certainly do that. That'd be great.
We'll definitely do that. I've got your email address, so I'll be following up. I also want to follow up with you about Scotland. So that
yes, absolutely. I think Scotland's a good idea, and there's plenty of other stuff that we can get to, but it's again we're only two people. I mean, you can't do everything, can you?
We can try.
You can try, but you've got to pick your fights as well, But great, brilliant. Well, listen, I will shoot, and let's talk again soon, and just keep doing what you're doing, Anne-Marie.
And you, Richard, and thanks again.
Okay, God bless. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. And thank you to everyone for listening. So we ran over by a half an hour there, but I'm sure you don't mind, and it is always lovely to talk to Richard. I will be following up on what we've said. So we'll follow up on a protest in Scotland on a live stream chat with Richard.